Really everything that happens anywhere, at home, at workplace, they are a story. Every single thing that we really experience in our lives is a story. They all have people, places, and things, and that is a story. So it doesn't matter what it is that you're looking at or trying to learn from. This concept and these tools are applicable. You can use them to learn from just about anything. But when we use these tools to learn, we don't want to be Michael Bay, okay? We want to make a dramatic and a beautiful story. Sometimes the stories we tell might have some comedy involved in them. In fact, I think that especially when it comes to incidents, so negative events, a lot of times those are kind of like tragic comedies, right? There is some sort of humor. You gotta get some humor out of it because life, otherwise you're not gonna make it. All right. That's how we deal with things when bad things happen. But there is a lot of drama and there is a lot of very rich characters in a rich setting, and that's what we're going for. Which this is what the storyline of an event should look like, right? This is the event where someone got injured, right? So they woke up, they went to work, all of this stuff is happening in the background. We all have this context. Regular work, work that we judge to have not gone well after something happens, work that we have judged to be a success, everyday work where it's not even on our map because it doesn't catch our attention because it's just everyday work, has all of this context all the time happening in the background. Um, who you're interacting with, if you have power or not to do your presentation, how, if you had to take longer to drop your kids off at school, I mean, all of those things are always happening, right? And this is really what it should look like. But unfortunately, this is what I see as someone who does reinvestigations and someone who's an expert on incident analysis, is that we often just have this very linear timeline of a worker got up, they brushed their teeth, they packed their lunch. On the way to work, they were just thinking about their job, like, I'm gonna get hurt. Today is a day. I've been waiting to do this. It's gonna happen. They have their lunch and then they get hurt, and that's it. No context, nothing. Okay. And then, sometimes people tell me, no, we took all these classes on incident analysis and everything. We learned you don't blame the worker, you don't blame the worker. So here we've improved. And here's our improved accident report. Okay. And it's like, no, this is basically the same thing, right? Except for now we're gonna, blame management or the corporation or the leadership, set this employee up to fail. So we just kind of move the blame up the chain, right? So we need to have stories that do two things to do this. This is what the research shows. So we have to have perspective taking, which is where we allow the audience to take on the perspective and identify with the characters, right? Have that connection. That builds empathy. And we have to have what's known as transportation or narrative transportation, where the story needs to be strong enough that allows our audience to kind of lose themselves temporarily in that story world, to transport themselves into that world, right? Perspective taking is really just that ability to take on the viewpoint of another person. And it's not a physical viewpoint, it's taking on their psychological viewpoint. So understanding what they were feeling, what they were thinking, their own attitudes toward things, their own understanding of the situation they were in at that time. And not just taking that on, but also understanding it and saying, okay, if I had been in that same situation, I actually, given your background and what you knew at the time, I would have made the same decisions. And that's when, as an incident investigator, you've got it. If you can say, I would have done the same thing. That's actually was reasonable at that time. You are in that person's world. You have empathy for those characters, right? And empathy reduces blame. The other thing that this process does through storytelling is it does allow you to be better at active listening, and it really improves the data that you can collect in interviews. If you're going to interview people after an event, if you're going to talk to people about their work, doing this perspective taking can really help that process and get you better data out of that. And then there's narrative transportation, right? That is that magic that happens when you have full emotional and mental attention towards a story, when the story has just captivated you. Okay. And it can be very powerful, very, very powerful when it comes to building empathy. There's a study that shows that they had two different groups. One group read literary masterpieces, so the type of books you read like in high school, like the big ones, the ones that we always read, like To Kill a Mockingbird, things like that, right? Um, then they had people, the other group, read entertainment fiction. Okay, so like People Magazine, National Enquirer, stuff like that. And what they did with these two groups is they tested their empathy using a psychological scale that we have to do that, a type of data instrument that we have that's validated to test empathy before and after they read the materials. Okay. People who read the literary masterpieces had an increase in empathy on the empathy scale. People who read the entertainment fiction actually had their empathy decrease. So that is not good. Okay. That is not what we want. So we need to be careful about how we tell stories, right? Like, how do we get this data and how do we do this? Because we want to try to increase empathy, not decrease it. So we don't want a Michael Bay story after an incident that we're trying to learn from. We want a beautiful, dramatic story that actually captures us and provides transportation and perspective taking. Okay. Oh, this is from that study. So this is what they said. When readers were presented with the story, yet failed to enter the world it creates, they did not respond empathetically because they never engaged with its characters, right? So good storytelling allows you to do that. Transportation really does matter. There's a woman, this is not my work, this is Christina Watke, who has a really cool website called The Shape of Story. And what she's done is she's taken some of these different types of stories, like the hero's journey, a romance, and she's put them kind of on Freytag's pyramid and kind of made a structure to it. And so each one's a little bit different. This is the typical story that has a character, a setting, it has that inciting incident. And those characters have goals and motivations because the audience connects with that, recognizes that, because we all have goals and motivation, right? And then there's struggles, there's all these conflicts, all these problems, all that stuff. And then there's that black moment, that dark moment, that crisis where you're like, oh my gosh, is this character going to make it through this or not? I don't know. And then usually like on a TV series, that's when they like cut and then you have to wait a week, or if it's the season end, you have to wait until a new season happens and you're like, oh man, we were almost there, right? And then you have that climax, and then you have like that person has the character has agency, or they get rescued or whatever happens there. And then you have that resolution that helps close out the loose ends and assuages the curiosity. And then, your hero, the main character returns home changed, hopefully for the better, but changed nonetheless, right? And so we can all learn from that. And so this is kind of the shape of a story that is a well-told story, okay? And when I saw this website, this is what it kind of reminded me of, which is that work is planned versus work and practice. Okay, because it's like, all right, yeah, we've got the structure, and then we have reality of what actually happens. Okay, and so when I look at this, I think, wow, this kind of fits because we have the characters in our story of work. We have this setting, where does the work take place? We have all the different things that happen during work, all those conflicts, all those problems. And that's just regular work. Regular work is the blue line, right? We're all surfing the blue line, just trying to make our way. And then, we have that accident, something doesn't go well. And then we have the investigation after that. And then we have all those corrective actions and learning. I was like, this kind of fits. But here's the issue is that a lot of times investigations focus too much on like the character, blaming them, um, just the accident itself, just like let's tell the story of Michael Bay movie, let's tell the story of the explosion over and over, but we don't look at any of the context and let's talk about the investigation, what we did there. And so we really have a tendency to focus on this stuff, unsafe acts, that's the character, unsafe conditions, that's the setting. And we don't focus enough on all these things that are context, right? That those characters in that incident story's goals and their motivations and what was going on throughout everyday work. How do we get these corrective actions and these learnings? We aren't really putting enough effort in these areas. All good stories need these things. They need a setting, they need characters, they need conflict, and they need a solution. Okay. So if you are going to provide these things, you are going to get a story together that makes sense and that we can use for learning. And if we do it correctly, we can provide perspective taking and we can provide transportation that allows everybody who is interacting with this story to understand what happened better and to increase our knowledge of that event, right? Because what you're trying to do is get mise en scene, all right, which is this idea that a setting in a story has all these different components to it. It's everything that the director decides to put in that shot, and it's multi-layered. Okay, and this is work as normal. This is all those things that go into a normal workday, all of those complicating things, all of this conflict, all of this context. That's what you're trying to capture when you are setting your scene. Not just at 7:04 p.m., Jen walked out her front door, slipped on ice, fell on her butt. And then the ambulance came and got her at 7:22. And then she got to the hospital. That is not mise en scene. That is just linear timeline. Okay, it's not a story, it's just data. Got to have a solution, or sometimes this is called a resolution, right? And so this is that ending. This provides context around the characters. This shows how the problem or the conflicts was solved. This is the learning. Okay, this ties up all those loose ends. It leaves your audience hopefully with a call to action, and it leaves them change. And hopefully, if you told a good story, it leaves them satisfied. All right, they learn something from it. You learn something from it.